Hello, beautiful homemakers. We are beginning Chapter 11, Peculiarities of Human Nature in Men, of Pamphlet 5 of the original 1922 Fascinating Womanhood pamphlets. Thus far, we have discussed how you can meet men and manage to be present where men are likely to notice you. The question now is, how, when other girls happen to be present in person, or in the man's memory, can you manage to draw his attention away from the other girls and concentrate it upon yourself? Attention being considered as the dawn of interest, how can you get such an interest in yourself to dawn in the man's mind? The best way, of course, is to be such a likable, wholesome, healthy, sane, and tenderly feminine young package of sweet girlishness that the man can't help being interested. That is why the first 9 chapters of this book were devoted to the purpose of making you just such an adorability, feminine in manner, dress, voice, and in every other essential. That is why you must never stop trying to improve yourself along the lines laid down in those chapters. But there is a great deal you can do both before and during the attainment of such perfection. So I think we need to recognize that in many movies today, they try and sell you on the opposite of what the truth is. Sorry, but men are not looking for tough chicks who can kick fannies, and they really don't admire women who can hold their liquor. As we've spoken about earlier, they're also not really that interested in your business acumen. The qualities men want in a wife are to be charming, to be feminine, and to have a worthy character, to be joyful, to be pleasable. Now, if you're putting your picture online, most women make the mistake of making that picture look ultra sexy. Too much cleavage, too much focusing on body parts. You need to look ultra feminine. You need to be in your best color. You need to look joyful, not sexy. That is, if you're looking for a husband, because that's what he's going to look for in a wife. If you're just looking for a fling, well, then you can just do whatever you want. Now, I don't know much about dating apps, but if you are both receiving each other's pictures like in eHarmony, because eHarmony has determined that you are a good match based on qualities and interests you put in, including religion and where you live, then don't be the one to contact him. Let him do the choosing. If you've given it time and the man you have your eye on hasn't messaged you, then I guess they say sometimes it works for you to message him. But in the olden days, the studies were that when the man pursues first, the relationship is more likely to last than if you were the one doing the pursuing. But like we've talked about, things are changing a little in that regard, with men being ultra cautious. So in some cases, you doing the pursuing or making that first move is going to be a red flag to them. They're like, nope, I don't want a pushy woman. Nope, I want to do the choosing. Nope. But for other men, they're like, yeah, she's interested in me. Sure, I'd love to message her back. So I say, give it a little bit of time. Don't rush to make the first move. See if he'll make it first. And it's a good idea to include your domestic side for your hobbies, not just what you do for a living. When you do finally get to a date, whether it be online or meeting someone randomly at an event or being set up on a blind date, have a 3-date rule. The first 2 dates should be a fun getting to know you without going too much in depth. You don't want to be talking about past boyfriends and relationships and why that didn't work out and how he hurt you and blah, blah, blah. It needs to be lighthearted and fun. But you're also trying to gauge Is he serious? Is he really looking for a wife? And by that third date, on the third date, that's when you need to say, I'm really looking to get married, and if you aren't serious about marriage, then we shouldn't go forward. But if you're also looking for a spouse, I would love to see you again. That is, if he asks you for a fourth date. You don't mention that until that fourth date is offered. At that point, if you want to be a homemaker, that's when you say, I want traditional roles. I would like to have children, and if at all possible, I would like to stay home with those children, especially when they're young, or whatever your parameters are. Some men may run from that. Fine, you don't need them. But some men are going to welcome that, and the amount of money they are making at that moment does not matter. If that desire is there, and if they are looking for traditional roles, then you might have just leapt to the front of the line. For me, I so didn't want to waste time that when my husband called me to go out on a first date, I said, if you're not looking to get married and have children and have an at-home wife to raise those children, then we don't even need to go out. As I told you last time, he had been on many, many dates, and I was the first woman to say that. Some of the women didn't want children, and most of them were really into their careers. That's not what he wanted. So you have to know what you want. And the other thing is, you may think that you want to keep working after children, but once you have your baby, you're going to take one look at that baby and realize, I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to leave. I remember one of my female bosses telling me, oh, it'll be hard to come back to work, but you'll get over it. I was thinking, no, I'm not coming back. I remember one woman who thought that she would have no problem coming back. She loved her job. When she finally came back 2 months later, all she did was sit at her desk and cry. And she gave her notice and was gone within 2 weeks. The other thing to watch out for on those first 3 dates is, if he is not husband material, then you cannot have a fourth date. Even when you are in a loose, precarious relationship with this person, that's going to inhibit any other man from asking you out. I know we've all seen the movies where the man you're supposed to be with, he's going to fight for you. He's going to steal you away from this other man. That rarely happens. Most men say, oh, she's made her choice. Okay, I'm going to go find someone whose heart is not encumbered with some other person. Few men will be willing to fight over you. Remember not to expect an eligible man to look like a husband. This is a huge mistake that women make. Men do not get motivated to be extremely successful until they have a wife and children to provide for. They themselves don't even realize that it's the providing for a wife and child that gives that extra drive to them. And you may think, oh, this man is driven enough. He doesn't need to be driven even more. But it's different versus when he's working for himself or when he's working for children. What you need to be looking for is, as we talked about in the first pamphlet, does he have the makings of a successful man? Is he ethical? Does he have drive, or does he just want to play? Does he have the same values as you? Does he want the same things from a family that you do? I didn't think I was going to be able to find a man that wasn't sports-oriented. And I was thrilled when I met my husband and realized, wow, we won't have to be watching sports during Thanksgiving dinner. That was a huge plus for me. Oftentimes, all a man needs is someone to believe in him. It's not about how much money he makes. It's amazing how doors can open after marriage. When I met my husband, I made more than him. He was only working part-time. But I made sure that we were going to be on the same page with me staying home. I had wanted to come home immediately after the marriage, but we decided that it would be best if he was working full-time and to be out of debt as much as possible. So I worked until my 9th month of pregnancy. And then I came home not having a clue how we were going to make it all. But he had been offered a full-time job. I paid off my car, but we had lots of bills rolling in. Yet I detail in my book how we managed. You have to decide what is the most important thing to you. It is amazing how you can squeeze by on one income, and I know, oh my goodness, it is so much harder today than it was 20 years ago when I first came home. But it's still possible, because I know a lot of women who do it. It's amazing what you can go without. And remember that every single married couple looks back fondly to the early years when they struggled financially because they worked together to get ahead. And that doesn't necessarily mean him working at a job and you working at a job. Sometimes it may, or sometimes it means you have to taper off work in order to make everything balance. Just don't expect your beau to be financially independent yet. You are the one that helps him get there. 3 fundamental characteristics of every man. Before we can determine what this is, however, we must obviously know something about the men themselves. No public speaker would ever expect to gain the interest of an audience which was utterly strange to him. He wouldn't know where to begin. Neither would an advertising man try to write an advertisement unless he first knew something about the kind of people the advertisement is designed to interest. The better a speaker or advertising man knows his audience, its peculiarities, ambitions, prejudices, opinions, and weaknesses, the more able he is to do and say the thing that will prove interesting to them. Similarly with a girl, the better she knows the men, their weaknesses, strengths, peculiarities, and sentiments, the more able she is to do and say the things that will appeal to them most. It is through this better understanding of the men themselves that many girls, not especially attractive otherwise, are able to entice the man's interest from their more attractive competitors. As men are shaped in myriad characters, this understanding is not easy of attainment. A few fundamental characteristics, however, are common to all men. Our purpose here is to ascertain these few characteristics which, in his attitude toward women, actuate or motivate a man most. We'll cover the first characteristic today. 1. Every man's longing for sympathetic understanding. The foremost of these is a longing for genuinely sympathetic understanding. Deep in his heart, every man longs for someone to whom he can confide his hopes, fears, ideals, and ambitions, without danger of ridicule or contempt. This applies as well to the popular man, the social lion, as to the recluse, for all have intimate feelings they usually dare not disclose. The average man is a sensitive and a lonely creature. With rare exceptions, those around him do not trouble to comprehend or appreciate what he is thinking or doing. Imagine, then, with what joy and comfort he turns to those who can offer not merely understanding, but the perfect understanding based on appreciation and sympathy. And this reminds me of that movie, The Shop Around the Corner with Jimmy Stewart. It's a great movie. Watch how she treats him badly, and notice how he's looking for sympathetic understanding. I think it's on YouTube, probably with a ton of commercials, but it's well worth watching, especially around Christmas. Sympathetic understanding, as here used, does not mean mere agreement of opinion. Two friends, for example, who understand and appreciate each other in the highest degree, may at the same time hold opposite opinions on politics, religion, and 100 other subjects. In such cases, each understands the motive which underlies his friend's contrary opinion and appreciates the sincerity and purity of that motive. In spite of the apparent disagreement, therefore, each is flattered by and rejoices in the esteem of the other. Another two men, on the contrary, who agree absolutely in opinion, are quite likely to hold each other's motives and characters in contempt. Agreement is not in the least indispensable to appreciation. With all those double negatives, it's hard to ascertain what they're trying to say. But I think what they're saying is sympathetic understanding is a lot more deep than just mere agreement or appreciation. And instead of sympathetic understanding, a lot of women seem to offer scorn and ridicule. Women boast and poke, and no man finds those behaviors endearing. Many men would just give up trying to find a pleasant, non-combative companion, while others just get irritated and become angry. And again, I am thinking of The Shop Around the Corner. That's exactly how the heroine of the movie behaves. I really suggest watching that movie. The next subsection is called The Man Who Needs Sympathy Most. Especially is this longing for sympathy apparent in the younger men. The average young man just starting out upon his career expects to be an all-conquering success. No project is too wild, no dream too fantastic. He is full of plans and proposals, assurance and enthusiasm. What he doesn't expect to do after a little preliminary preparation, of course, simply isn't worth doing. He can find 100 flaws in the way older heads are managing things now, but you just wait until he gets his chance and revolutionizes matters. Meantime, life isn't worth living if he can't find someone to whom he can tell all this, how things ought to be, how they will be when he gets his chance, and how rotten it is because they won't give it to him immediately. It's hilarious. I can completely remember men at work acting this way. But most of his youthful associates are too much occupied with their own aspirations to listen to his. Older people will only laugh at him. Nowhere can he find a sympathetic, uncritical listener and confidant. The cry of his soul for appreciation and encouragement, therefore, must usually be suppressed. And that was a key sentence. Nowhere can he find a sympathetic, uncritical listener and confidant. The cry of his soul for appreciation and encouragement must usually be suppressed, and that is a wife's job for all men, no matter their age. Reaction sets in. He begins to think everybody, young and old, is against him and conspiring to keep him from getting his chance. But if he needed sympathy and encouragement in his enthusiasm, how much more he needs it now in his dependence, and how eagerly he will seek out the girl who is shrewd enough to give it to him. And this is why you don't need to be model gorgeous to catch the attention of a man, because he is looking for, more than eye candy, sympathetic understanding. As a man grows older, he becomes, it would seem, hardened, incredulous, and less sensitive to lack of appreciation. He learns to withstand alone the buffets of time and circumstance, and no longer hopes for a sympathy in which he does not believe. In fact, however, his bitter experience has only demonstrated how rare a solace sympathetic understanding is. He prizes it now more than ever. Most men are badly misinterpreted by the world in general. The older a man gets, the more bitterly he resents this misinterpretation and apparent indifference to the bigger and nobler elements of his character. He represses his craving for understanding and sympathy because he does not believe they are to be had. But the craving is just as strong and just as persistent as it is in a younger man. And that is the truth. And if you're married, your husband needs this just as much as a single man. When he comes home from work, do you greet him, no matter what you are doing, no matter what you are in the middle of? No matter if you've been outside the home all day or not. When he comes home, stop what you're doing and greet him. He will never greet you if you don't set the example in how a person should be greeted when they come home. So start today and change the way you communicate with your husband. Now they're going to tell a little story called The Case of Jim. This craving for appreciation will be better understood perhaps if we study its influence upon the individual man. Let us take as an example a man named Jim. Jim is a silent sort of fellow, neither a good mixer nor a good entertainer. He's usually glum as an owl, and does not pretend to be pleased when he is not. Everybody knows he has peculiar political ideas, but who cares? Everybody knows that he is highly respected in business circles, that he's getting on, but who stops to ask why? Most people, in fact, take it for granted that only luck or favoritism could be behind the success of the taciturn Jim. His family and close acquaintances know better, of course, because they get a more intimate view of his idiosyncrasies. They have seen his habitual silence metamorphosed by a mere reference to his crazy political ideas into a storm of able and eloquent defense. They have seen him swept off his feet by a contagious whirlwind enthusiasm which carries everything and everyone along with him. And they have seen him, when the reaction came, miserable, fretful, the slave of a dejection that shuts out the last glimmer of hope. Variable as the wind, he is understood and appreciated even less by his family than by total strangers. Yet Jim is puzzling only because they do not try to understand him. Actually, the poor fellow is one of the most likable of young men. To appreciate this, we need only hide ourselves behind the vines screening a certain attractive young lady's front porch, and wait for Jim to make one of his increasingly frequent calls. Jim calls on the girl. This young lady doesn't bother her pretty head about politics, yet she has no sooner welcomed Jim than he steers the conversation into his channel of politics. She prods him from time to time until he is thoroughly wound up in his hobby, and then she watches him. If you observe her closely, you will find that she listens only casually to what he says, but that, nevertheless, she finds a great deal to admire and appreciate. What on earth is it? Not his appearance, because he's just an average young man. Not his language, for hers is just as good. And surely not his ideas, because they are of little interest to her. But if you will listen a while and watch carefully, the truth will gradually dawn upon you. She sees loyalty and courage and idealism. Here is a man whose heart rings true to what he believes to be fair and square. What matters the belief itself if it be true or false? Okay, I've got to disagree with that. It matters a lot. So she sits there and admires not his words, not his ideas, but his character, his manliness, and his unswervable championship. Every burst of vehemence on his part, which would only serve to irritate others who did not agree with him, is regarded by her as but another expression of the glorious and steadfast champion. So long as she can watch the rapt animation of his countenance and the unfolding of his admirable character, she asks nothing else. The revelation of character is 1,000 times more important to her than ideas and opinions and politics. For these things, courage, faith, loyalty, and truth are after all the only things that count. And that is why the belief itself needs to be true and not false. These are the things that she admires in Jim: faith, courage, loyalty, truth. Even his moods of depression arouse admiration in her. Isn't he depressed only because of what he considers the futility of his championship? Isn't this but another indication of how loyally absorbed he is in the success or failure of what he considers right? Thus, through every action and every work of Jim's, she can read signs of a character that demands sympathy and appreciation. Jim's greatest happiness, and this appreciation on her part is the greatest happiness Jim knows, as the lack of it in others is his greatest grief. Drop in on this tete-a-tete and see for yourself how quickly, when someone lacking sympathy appears, Jim withdraws again into a miserable shell of silence. Jim's taciturnity, in fact, is due mainly to the failure of most people to understand him. It is very disagreeable to have the wrong interpretation put upon what he does and says, to have his manliest and sincerest motives perpetually misconstrued. Sounds to me, though, like he's not a very good communicator, and that he's a bit selfish. I think he needs to work on understanding other people more. A study of any man's character will reveal a similar situation. The motives of every man are more or less misconstrued, more so in many cases than those of Jim. And this last sentence is in all caps. Instead of being a characteristic of Jim alone, therefore, the craving for sympathetic understanding is a characteristic of every man. Now, if you've ever heard a man say, "You just don't really know me at all," or "You just don't understand me," that man feels all alone, and he is looking for sympathetic understanding. Of course, when they don't tell us or talk to us about what is in their hearts or on their minds, how are we supposed to know? We must be willing to just listen and be encouraging, not being demanding and not prattling on. Can you just sit with him in comfortable silence until he begins to open up and divulge his secret longings and ambitions? Many women are unable to do that, and so it's no wonder why they never understand their man. Find a man that you can listen to, offer him sympathetic understanding, and you will be a rare jewel in his sight. We'll study the second secret next time. Bye!